The 5 habits are personal minimums, developing risk management skills, getting adequate sleep before you fly, following a checklist, and seeking additional training. If you don't follow these habits, you could be putting yourself in major danger. And if you don't respond to certain situations correctly, or if you lose situational awareness, you could put yourself in real bad situation. Start doing these 5 habits that we're going to talk about in this video. You could avoid these pitfalls. Also, one of these habits I believe is the most important aspect of a successful pilot. So stick around and see which one I'm talking about. Hey, my name is Josh, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm an instrument pilot with over 100 hours of flight time. Let's jump into the first one, which is developing personal minimums. So if you haven't thought about personal minimums before you go flying, that's something you need to do as soon as possible. You can download a template, or you can just go off the cusp of kind of what you think feels comfortable. But I highly recommend downloading a template because they give you basically step-by-step instructions, or like a plan that you can look at and kind of give you an idea of what your personal minimums might be. AOPA has a great one that I'll link in the description below, and it'd be something to definitely check out if you don't already have personal minimums. All right, so let's jump into the second one, which is developing risk management skills. All right, so a great way to develop risk management skills is by using a risk management checklist. So there's 2 that I really highly recommend. That's gonna be the PAVE checklist and the I'm Safe checklist. The PAVE checklist is gonna be PAVE. The P stands for person, the A stands for aircraft, the V stands for environment, and the E stands for external pressure. The next is gonna be the I'm Safe checklist. That's gonna be IMSAFE. I is for illness, the M is for medication, S is for stress, the A is for alcohol, F is for fatigue, and E is for emotion. These checklists are something you should go over before every flight during your pre-flight section, so that you understand how you're feeling, what you're going through, and if you're mentally ready to go fly. Management of external pressures is the #1 most important risk management skill you need to learn. External pressures are the #1 cause of accidents in the aviation community. Emotional pressures can cause pilots to ignore other risk management factors that they normally would take into consideration, but because there's an external pressure and it's causing an emotional reaction, it could cause major issues along the way. Another tool that us pilots can use to mitigate risk is a flight risk assessment tool. This flight risk assessment tool helps you break down different aspects of flight that you think might be problematic. I'm gonna leave a link for that down in the description below. Now let's jump into the third section, which is you need to get adequate sleep before you go flying. So what we're going to talk about in this section is what could happen if you don't get adequate sleep, and then I'm going to give you some tips on how to mitigate that with different things you can do before your flight. Some of the issues that could come up because of inadequate sleep are impaired alertness and impaired performance, basically impairing your judgment to make sound decisions. Loss of situational awareness, the basics like feeling drowsy and unmotivated to do things. Those are all symptoms that you didn't get enough sleep last night. Now, what's the appropriate amount of sleep a pilot should get? According to different sleep studies I've looked at, and even according to the FAA, a pilot should get anywhere between 6 to 8 hours of sleep before they go flying. Now, the countermeasures in case you didn't get enough sleep, which I have a feeling is a few of you out there. Now, you could take a 3-hour nap before your flight, and that should give you around 12 hours of alertness if you didn't get adequate sleep last night. Now, if you don't have that kind of time, a shorter power nap, anywhere between 10 to 30 minutes, will give you about 3 to 4 hours of alertness. But there's a caveat there. You need to give yourself about 20 minutes to 30 minutes to wake up. And I think we've all done that. We've taken a power nap and then we've realized like, oh crap. You start to realize like, hey, that power nap did something. Another one that most people don't really know about is before you go flying, eat something healthy, preferably something that has high protein in it. So if you didn't get enough sleep last night and you pound like a protein bar or a protein shake or even just a piece of chicken and some salad, that's gonna drastically improve how well your alertness is and how well your performance is during that flight. Another thing you can do if you didn't get adequate enough sleep is you can drink plenty of water. Another thing you can do is keep your environment cold. That'll stimulate your nervous system and keep you more alert. Last but not least, if you're in the cockpit already and you forgot some of these steps and you're kind of starting to feel drowsy, one of the things you can do is you can stretch, move your neck, stretch it out a little bit, maybe stretch your arms, kind of do one of these numbers. Give yourself get that blood flowing a little bit while you're sitting there in the cockpit to kind of help yourself out, because that will definitely, once the blood starts flowing, it'll make you more alert and bring more oxygen to your brain. Now let's jump into the fourth habit, which is following checklists. Now we've already discussed some pre-flight checklists and some personal risk management checklists. Now let's talk about some other checklists that can definitely help you and improve your performance while flying. The main checklist that I harp on personally is my emergency checklist. You don't want to be fumbling around during an emergency, especially when your life could very well depend on it. So some of the benefits of checklists. So the big one is checklists applied correctly can bring a plane safely back to the ground. Life-saving procedures will eventually allow you to have life-saving performance. Yeah, so another thing, checklists will also help you with single pilot resource management, which allows you to free up your brain space to actually fly the airplane rather than dealing with something that you have to think about and where you can just refer back to the checklist. Another aspect of checklists is creating your own standard operating procedures for yourself personally. So different airlines have different standard operating procedures. Different companies that you work for throughout your aviation career are going to have standard operating procedures. Now you yourself also should have standard operating procedures. Having your own standard operating procedures goes back to that external pressure we talked about. It allows you to mitigate that external pressure by having your own set of procedures to keep yourself safe. Some examples of standard operating procedures: allow extra time on a trip to pick up some extra fuel if need be, or if you happen to run into severe weather and you need to chill out for a little bit. Give yourself a little bit of extra time and implement that into your standard operating procedures so that when you go flying, one of those external pressures of time isn't that big of a deal. Another one is have alternate plans for if you have to do a late arrival or something. So maybe you have a backup travel setup. So instead of just relying solely on flying the aircraft or flying your own personal aircraft, maybe have a driving plan, or maybe an airline plan if you're balling like that. But don't just rely on one aspect of travel. So that way, if something goes wrong, you're not forced to kind of deal with something that you don't really want to deal with. Another one is make sure you always have a way to advise somebody who might be waiting on you and then know how to get in contact with them if for whatever reason you flying an aircraft to your destination gets delayed. Next one is going to be manage passenger expectations. So if you got your family on board, make sure that they understand safety is paramount and that you love them enough that you've planned ahead and that these standard operating procedures are in place to protect them. Eliminate the external pressure to get home the same day or even by the end of the night by carrying around an overnight bag or an overnight kit that'll get you through a couple days just in case of an emergency strike. Let's dive into the final habit that I highly recommend, which is seek additional training. This is the last point, but I believe it's the most important one as a pilot. I believe it to be the most important because if you stop learning as a pilot, your skills will deteriorate and your proficiency will deteriorate. And now the questions are in the air: are you still a safe pilot? You might be a legal one, but are you a safe one? So what are some ways that we can seek additional training? One thing I recommend is joining some sort of flight group or flight community that has access to a flight simulator where you can work on your skills and improve them over time, and also play around with different emergency situations so that you feel proficient in the air no matter what. Another thing I recommend that you can do on the cheap is practice those emergency procedures or those maneuvers or even those checklists in your head while you're waiting on your kid in the car line or while you're waiting on delivery boy, or anytime you have some spare time. Just mentally go over those things in your head, and that'll definitely help you increase your safety aspect as a pilot in the air. And the last thing that I absolutely recommend is overlearning something. So what does that mean? It means if you're studying to be a private pilot, why don't you, and you feel proficient as a private pilot, why don't you go in and start studying instrument pilot or commercial pilot or the next couple steps ahead so that you can now apply the private pilot to a step ahead. And so when you go back over with your instructor, something that's basic, you have a different reference point, and that helps you create different brain synapses and allows you to be a safer pilot. This is talked about heavily by a gentleman named Scott Young, who wrote a book called Ultra Learning. Yeah, so if you want to dive deeper into this idea of overlearning, I highly recommend the book Ultra Learning by Scott Young. And last but not least, never stop learning. No matter what you're doing, no matter where you are in life, as a pilot, you should never stop learning. You can learn from your kids, you can learn from your wife, you can learn from anybody. One of my favorite quotes is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. In my walks, every man I meet is my superior in some way. And in that, I learn from him. As we go about our day, there's always something we can be learning, and there's always a way we can bring it back to aviation. So to recap, develop your personal minimums, develop those risk management skills, get adequate sleep before you go flying, follow those checklists, and seek additional training. Again, my name is Josh. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking for more of my content, I'm gonna leave some more over here. And until next time, stay safe out there.